The first light of dawn was still a fragile whisper on the horizon when Amina stepped out of her tiny, cramped room in the worn-down neighborhood that seemed forgotten by time and prosperity. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and decaying rubbish, the remnants of yesterday's chaos left in heaps along the narrow alleys. Yet, for Amina, this place was both a battlefield and a sanctuary. At 15 years old, she was no stranger to hardship. Each morning, she forced her tired legs to carry her out into the world, where hope seemed like a distant, flickering candle struggling against the suffocating darkness of poverty. Her fingers, nimble and scarred from countless days of searching, through garbage, reached out carefully to gather what others had discarded without a second thought. Broken bottles, crushed tin cans, torn pages of newspapers soaked in rainwater. To anyone else, these were trash, meaningless and forgotten. But to Amina, each piece was a fragment of possibility, a coin to be earned, a step closer to the school she longed to attend. The rhythm of the city waking up was brutal and relentless. Vendors setting up their stalls shouted over the cacophony of honking cars and barking dogs. The distant sounds of children playing were drowned by the harsh reality surrounding her. Here, survival was the only game. School was a luxury few could afford. And for Amina, every day spent scavenging was a gamble between hunger and hope. Her mother, once a vibrant woman full of dreams, was now a shadow of herself, confined to their rickety bed by an illness that no medicine could cure. Her little brother's laughter was a rare and precious sound that kept her moving forward, even when the weight of the world seemed unbearable on her slender shoulders. She had learned early that dreams alone didn't fill empty stomachs or pay school fees, but she clung to those dreams fiercely, like a lifeline in a storm. As she moved silently through the labyrinth of trash heaps, her eyes sharp and unyielding. The city's indifference stung like 1,000 needles. People hurried past, their faces masked by apathy or busy thoughts, too wrapped up in their own lives to spare a glance at the girl bent over the filth, fighting to carve a future from what others rejected. Yet despite the invisibility that cloaked her, Amina's spirit burned bright. She was determined not to be swallowed by this place, to prove that even from the lowest depths, someone could rise. The sun finally broke over the skyline, casting long shadows across the broken pavement and turning the rubbish into a cruel glitter that mocked her efforts. But Amina kept working, her hands moving with practiced precision, gathering what could be sold. Carefully stacking her small collection into a torn sack she dragged behind her like a worn-out companion. Her heart pounded not only with exhaustion, but with a quiet hope. Today's haul could mean a meal, or perhaps a few coins towards the school fees that threatened to pull her dreams apart. Meanwhile, far above the chaos of the city streets, in a gleaming glass tower that pierced the sky, David Carter looked down on the world with the kind of detached curiosity that only immense wealth could afford. A billionaire by birth and by fortune, David was a man shaped by power, control, and calculated risks. His life was a series of boardroom battles, luxury retreats, and high-stakes investments. Yet, on this particular morning, something was different. As he sipped his dark coffee, his gaze drifted beyond the familiar comforts of his penthouse. His eyes settled on the sprawling city below, a city where lives like Amina's were invisible to most, buried beneath the noise and rush of progress. But David's binoculars found her, the small figure moving with quiet determination amid the refuse. For reasons he couldn't yet name, he watched her closely, intrigued by the rawness of her struggle, by the defiant flicker of hope in her tired eyes. She was a paradox to him, a fragile silhouette against a backdrop of decay, yet unyielding, fighting not just for survival, but for a future. The thought unsettled him. What drove this girl to risk everything? What dreams lay hidden behind her worn clothes and dirt-streaked face? Unconsciously, David felt the weight of a growing responsibility, a call to witness and perhaps to act. But for now, he remained a silent observer, watching the invisible thread that connected their worlds. Two lives on opposite ends of the spectrum, yet bound by an unseen fate. Back on the ground, Amina's journey was far from over. Her small frame moved with an urgency born of necessity, but also with the quiet grace of someone who refused to be broken. The city's harsh light revealed the grime etched into her skin and the tired lines carved by years of struggle. But it could not dim the fierce spark inside her. Every can collected, every scrap sorted was a battle fought against the cruel odds stacked against her. Yet, even as exhaustion clawed at her bones and the relentless demands of her life threatened to crush her spirit, Amina held on to one unshakable truth. Education was her only escape. The school fees she scrambled to pay were more than numbers on a bill. They were the price of freedom, a ticket out of the cycle of despair that gripped her neighborhood. She knew that without them, her dreams would wither and die like the discarded garbage she sifted through each day. As the morning gave way to afternoon, Amina's sack grew heavier, a small fortune in broken pieces and forgotten remnants. She paused for a moment, her breath shallow, eyes scanning the street for signs of danger or kindness. Both rare commodities in her world. Passing strangers barely spared her a glance, and the city moved on, indifferent. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, a silent battle raged. One between the invisible girl and the unforgiving city, between dreams and despair. Her story was one of countless others, often unheard, but no less profound. It was in these moments, between the grime and the grit, that Amina's true strength shone brightest, a raw, unfiltered resilience that no wealth could buy, no privilege could grant. Unbeknownst to her, that strength was being watched, noted, and understood by the man in the tower. David's heart, usually steeled against the world, stirred with a fragile empathy he had long buried beneath years of success and solitude. What started as a passing curiosity was quickly becoming something deeper, a yearning to bridge the gap between their worlds. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows as Amina finally made her way to the marketplace where she would sell her small haul to a scrap dealer known for his fairness. Each transaction was a negotiation, a test of her worth in a world that valued her very little. But today, she managed to earn enough to cover half of her school fees, a small victory, but one that lit a fragile hope in her heart. As she counted the coins, her fingers trembling from cold and fatigue, a stray dog wandered close, sniffing at the sack. She smiled faintly, the briefest flicker of warmth piercing her exhaustion, but the day was not over. There were chores too, complete ailing mother to tend, little brother to feed, and lessons to prepare for. School would wait for tomorrow, but the fight to survive raged on. Meanwhile, David retreated from his window, the image of the girl picking trash etched indelibly into his mind. He knew that fate had placed her in his path for a reason. The quiet desperation she embodied was a mirror to a part of himself he had long ignored. The following days promised change, but for now, the city slept unaware of the unlikely story unfolding between a girl who picked trash to pay school fees and a billionaire who had just begun to watch her. Days passed like heavy shadows over Amina's fragile world, each one folding into the next with the same exhausting routine of scavenging, struggling, and surviving. Yet beneath the surface of her relentless labor, a subtle shift began to stir. An invisible thread pulling at the edges of her life, one she did not yet understand. David Carter, the billionaire who had watched her with quiet fascination, was no longer content to remain a distant observer. The image of Amina's worn hands and fierce determination haunted his mind, pricking at the hardened walls he had built around his heart. He sent discreet aides to gather information, to learn who she was, what shaped her, and how deep her hardships. And when they returned with her story, a tale of loss, resilience, and dreams unfulfilled, something inside David softened, a feeling foreign to a man so accustomed to control. He decided he would intervene, not with the cold transactions of business, but with something infinitely rarer, genuine human connection. Meanwhile, Amina continued to battle the weight of the world on her own. Every coin earned was a victory fought against the gnawing hunger and the fear that her schooling might one day come to an end. The nights were long and lonely, filled with whispered prayers and the soft sobs she stifled so no one would hear. She carried the burden of her family's survival like an invisible cloak, never allowing herself the luxury of despair. Then one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city's harsh noises softened into an uneasy quiet, Amina found herself sitting near the edge of the dump site, her body aching and her spirit frayed. Her sack of collected recyclables lay beside her, a meager fortune in broken pieces. Yet her thoughts were consumed not by what she had gathered, but by the impossibility of her dreams. It was then that she heard footsteps. Soft, measured, unfamiliar. She looked up and saw a man approaching, his clothes crisp and clean, out of place amid the grime and decay. It was David Carter. His presence was both surreal and startling, like a sudden shaft of light cutting through darkness. "I've been watching you," he said quietly, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. "You don't have to fight this battle alone." Amina's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to recoil, to hide the raggedness that defined her. But something in his eyes disarmed her suspicion, a sincerity she had not expected from someone so far removed from her world. The billionaire didn't offer empty promises or charity. Instead, he extended a hand of mentorship, a chance to change the course of her life not by mere handouts, but through opportunity and belief. Their worlds, once separated by an unbridgeable chasm, suddenly found a fragile connection, but trust did not come easily. Amina's pride was a fortress built on years of hardship and betrayal. Could she believe that this man, with his vast wealth and influence, genuinely cared? Or was this just another form of power, another game she was too small to understand? David understood the hesitation. He did not rush her or demand immediate faith. Instead, he showed patience, visiting quietly, offering support in small ways, listening to her fears and dreams with a humility that surprised them both. Slowly, a bond formed. Fragile, tentative, but real. As days turned into weeks, Amina found herself daring to imagine a future she had never allowed herself to dream. One where education was not a luxury but a certainty, where her family could breathe without the constant shadow of poverty, where her own potential was not shackled by circumstance. Yet the path was far from smooth. The weight of her past pressed heavily, and old wounds ached with the fear of change. The city's harsh realities still awaited her beyond the walls of newfound hope, reminding her that dreams were fragile and easily shattered. David, too, faced his own battles, battling the skepticism of those around him who questioned why a man of his stature would involve himself in the life of a girl from the dumps, confronting his own fears of failure and the possibility that some wounds ran too deep to heal. But neither of them could deny the quiet transformation unfolding. The slow-burning fire of trust, hope, and determination began to illuminate the darkness, promising a story not just of survival, but of redemption and connection. In the midst of the city's indifference, a billionaire and a girl who once picked trash were rewriting the narrative, proving that sometimes the most profound changes start with the simplest acts of seeing and believing.